للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brothers and sisters. Welcome to this circle on the miracle of the Qur'an. Inshallah ta'ala, it's going to be a bit of an introduction to the topic because this subject is a very big subject, very vast subject. And I don't know how many of you have studied this subject or are familiar with it or researched it, whether you are kind of just finding out about it or you have some knowledge about it. So I'm kind of guessing really as to the level in which to actually discuss this subject. But I've prepared basically a presentation to go through it, and I think it should be about 45 minutes. So this is not going to be a standard circle. It's more like, think of it more like a lecture, and you're kind of listening through it. And what I would recommend that you do is, if you have any questions or any points that you want to make, just make a note of it or put it into the chat. And then after I finish, we can actually go through them one by one, inshallah ta'ala. If I can answer them, I'll do. If I can't, then I can't. So, excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. So that's the plan, inshallah ta'ala. So just try to listen through it for the next 45 minutes, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so I'm going to basically share my screen, and hopefully you will be able to see it. And so what I need is some confirmation that you are able to see the screen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, Bismillah. So miracle of the Quran. I want to start off with this quote, really, to kind of set the scene. That an 11th century poet, his name is Ibn Rashiq, he said, whenever a poet emerged in an Arab tribe, other tribes would come to congratulate. Feast would be prepared. The women would join together on lutes as they do at weddings, and old and young men would all rejoice at the good news, for this was a shield for their honor, a defense of their lineages, and a immortalization of their triumphs. The Arabs used to congratulate each other only on the birth of a child and when a poet rose amongst them. So the reason why I've put this quote is really to understand the topic that we're dealing with. We need to really appreciate the importance and the significance of Arabic language at the time of the revelation of the Quran, because the Quran was revealed in the Arabic language, and the challenge and the miraculousness of the Quran, it's actually a linguistic miracle. Although many scholars and researchers and academics, they've discussed various facets of its miraculousness, such as prediction of future events, or discussion of historical events which were not known to the Arabs. Others, even now today, there is a major discussion taking place on the so-called scientific miracle of the Quran. The Quran talked about some natural and scientific or natural phenomena, which is proven to be discovered lately through the means of science. And various other sort of features of the Quran. People have discussed it in the subject of the miracle of the Quran. But in reality, the miracle of the Quran, the miraculousness is to do with its linguistic and its literary quality, because this is what the Quran really came as its lasting miracle. So before we actually go into that, it's very difficult, especially those who are, especially us who are non-Arabs, who don't speak Arabic. It's really difficult to appreciate the miracle of the Quran. So it's just to give you a kind of a taster, just to appreciate the the environment, the linguistic environment in which the Quran was being recited, so that you can kind of appreciate the impact of the Quran in that time. So I want to mention a couple of anecdotes, really, just to show to you the importance of the of the Arabic language, just to give you an insight as to the power of it and the influence of the Arabic language. So I want to mention a couple of stories, really, and by the way, these slides, if anyone's interested, we can make them available. So you can have them as notes and so forth. So let me tell you a couple of stories just to highlight the importance and the significance. So there was a tribe called Banu Anfun Naqa, right? Banu Anfun Naqa, which literally means the descendants of the camel's nose. So this was the name of their tribe, right? And it's a derogatory nickname that was given to them because one of their grandfathers once slaughtered a camel and distributed all the meat and forgot his son. So his wife sent his son to collect his share of the meat. However, there was only the head of the camel that was left. So he handed it to the boy, who inserted his fingers inside the camel's nose and set off dragging it in the streets. And from that day on, he was known as Anfun Naqa. Anfun Naqa, meaning the camel's nose. And afterwards, his descendants, they were nicknamed Banu Anfun Naqa, okay, the descendants of the camel's nose. A label that was, they were ashamed and they tried to hide by attributing themselves to Qura'i, right? Qura'i was the father of Anfun al-Naqa instead. So, however, one day, this tribe hosted a great poet. His name was Al-Hutayya, and they honored him and treated him with kindness. And as a token of appreciation from the poet, he wrote a poem in which he said, قَوْمٌ هُمُ الْأَنْفُ وَأَذْنَابُ غَيْرُهُم. They are the nose and everyone else is the tail. وَمَنْ يَسَاوِي بِأَنْفِ النَّقَى الذَّنَبَ. And who would equate a nose of a camel to its tail? So he cleverly twisted the conception of this nickname from being a pejorative meaning to a positive one. And this was like a massive paradigm shift that turned Banu Anfun Naqa from a tribe ashamed of its own name to one that is proud of it. And all of this was only achieved through a single line of poetry. Just to give you another example of Al-Muhallaq and his daughters. So Al-Muhallaq, he's a man who lived in pre-Islamic Mecca, and he was a poor man. He didn't have any money, he didn't have any status, he was in the sort of the lowest rank of society. But he had many daughters, and he was struggling to get them married off. And he couldn't find anyone to marry because of his lack of his financial means and his status and so forth, right? So one day, his wife, intelligent lady, she said to him, the great poet Al-Ash'a is coming to Mecca, and he's very eloquent man with an unmatched reputation in poetry. And he's, whenever he praises someone, their status kind of elevates, and whenever he sort of denigrates someone, their status kind of lowers in rank in society. He was such a powerful poet. So she basically suggested to Al-Muallaq to invite him and to host them. So he invited them, and he slaughtered a camel, and he hosted Al-A'sha, all right, and fed him and gave him wine and dessert and everything. And then so Al-Ashaq, asked Al-Muhallaq, about his situation, about his family condition. And Al-Muhallaq, he kind of insinuated, he said, look, his hardship and the struggle that he has in marrying of his daughters and so forth. So he kind of, put forward his situation, explained. So Al-A'sha, the following day, he went to Ukaz. Right, Ukaz, you got to understand, Ukaz is a marketplace for poetry delivery and competitions. So they used to have this marketplace where all the best poets in the Arabia, they would come and they would actually recite their poetry and they would compete with each other, right? It's, if you kind of think of, Britain's Got Talent and that kind of, these kinds of shows that you can think of now today. But in that time, poetry, it was competition, and it was the most important thing in the lives of the Arabs when it came to entertainment, literature, and culture. So Al-A'sha, he went to Ukaz, and then he actually praised Al-Muhallaq for his hospitality and his generosity. Within a day, it was said that all of his daughters were married off to noble and rich families because of Al-A'sha's poem, just to show you the power of Arabic poetry and Arabic literature at that time. That's just another example. Give you another example of Banu Numair. So Banu Numair. This is a tribe, and this tribe was, they were very proud, and they considered this to be, one of the most highly esteemed of tribes, right? And so whenever they used to, speak who they were, they used to kind of stretch their voice and stick their head up and say, we are from Banu Numair. But all of this came to an end, right? It came to an end once a distinguished poet, his name is Jarir, satirized one of their poets and nobles, Al-Ra'i al-Numeri. Al-Ra'i al-Numeri, he was one of their poets from Banu Numair. And he actually, had a line. He says, فَغُدِّ الطَّرَفَ إِنَّكَ مِن Numair. Lower your gaze, for you are from Numair. فَلَا كَعْبَ بَلَغْتَ وَلَا كِلَابَ. You have neither reached the rank of Ka'b nor that of Kilab. So Ka'b and Kilab, they are two tribes that were considered the lowest of all tribes. So this verse was the last nail on the coffin of Banu Numair's pride and superiority. And from that day onward, all their pride was dissipated and became of the past. And they even became ashamed to ascribe themselves to their father, Numair, and instead they started ascribing to their grandfather, Amir. So they became Banu Amir. So this is an example. So the reason why I'm mentioning these examples, just to show to you the importance and the significance of Arabic and Arabic poetry. The poets, they were like, they were treated with respect. They were their leaders, they were their thinkers, their philosophers. They had a really high position in society. And through a line of poetry, your situation of your tribe could be elevated or demoted, or a position of an individual that could be elevated or demoted through lines of poetry. They can go to war. Through lines of poetry, they could actually make peace. It was such a powerful medium at that time. So coming back to our subject here of the Quran. Now, Quran, this is something very unique to the Quran. Quran is a miracle and a message together, combined. Now, what do I mean by that? If you think about the previous prophets, whether Prophet Musa or Isa or any of the other prophets and messengers, they were given miracles as a proof for their honest and being trustworthy, and to be accepted, they are messengers and prophets from God. They were given miracles, and miracles are really extraordinary events, yeah, supernatural events, which human beings, they cannot perform. So in the case of Musa alayhi salam, we have many examples that, you know, the staff turned into a snake, that he split the Red Sea. Isa alayhi salam, he brought back the dead from the life, brought back the dead to life. You know, so they had many physical miracles which people witnessed, and then people, you know, took that as a sign or an evidence. They are the prophets and they are messengers, but their message was separate, right? Their message was separate. What was the communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was separate. Yeah, it was not linked fundamentally to their miracle. It was separate. So their miracle was temporary. Only those people who were at that time who witnessed it. And once that event passed, and that was the end of it, and their message was separated from it. With Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's unique. Although he had physical miracles, there are many, and many of the companions and the people witnessed them, but his ultimate miracle was the Qur'an. And the Qur'an is the miracle in the sense that it is a literary works, yeah, which is beyond the ability of human beings to imitate or to produce like of it. So the Quran today is with us, and the Quran obviously is in the Arabic language, which is where the miraculousness is, and at the same time the Quran in its meanings are the messages. So we say Quran is unique, it's a miracle and a message combined in one. Okay, and today I want to really kind of talk a little bit about the linguistic aspects of the Quran. So let me just, you know, mention a couple of examples, and there's so many to mention, just in terms of when the Quran was first recited, and subsequently what was the impact of the Quran. So, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in, I think, Surah Al-Hijr, maybe this one, فَاصْدَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ. So this is a phrase, if you like, from the Quran. فَاصْدَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ, right? So proclaim openly all that has been commanded to you to say. Now, a Bedouin Arab, he heard this, and he immediately said, what is it that I hear? This is no merely a human speech. And then he prostrated himself with the words, saying, so eloquent was this speech that I bowed down in worship to the one who said that word, or said this. This was the impact, because, and again, due to time, فَاصْدَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ, this phrase, this usage was like new, and it was not known, and it was something very unique, because the word sada means this, sada al-fajr, yeah, it means the first light. It actually means the first light of dawn. Literally, they use this kind of phrase, the first light of dawn. Now, what is intended from this expression is to say, do, you know, fa'mal, yeah, fa'mal, do bima tu'mar, right? Do what you've been commanded. But the expression that was used is fasda', right? Which is, rather than saying doing, but it has this figurative connotation in terms of this command, which is that you're commanded to proclaim Islam in the same way how the first lights break through at Fajr, at dawn. So this is the imagery that's being portrayed. And so when this Bedouin, he heard this, he was just completely amazed by it, and he made prostration. Now, just to indicate to you, there was amongst the Arabs, when they used to hear lines of poetry or verses which was sublime, they used to make prostration. That was their prostration they used to do. They used to prostrate, all right? So for example, Labid. So Labid, he is a very famous poet. He is one of the poet who was the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and one of his poems is one of the poems was hanged on the Kaaba, which are known as the Mu'allaqat, the hanging odes, right? So these are the best poems that was in the Arabia at that time. They were considered to be masterpieces. They were actually hung in the Kaaba. Now, so there's a line of his poetry. Al-Farazdaq, he's another famous poet. He heard this line, which is وَجَلَ سُيُولُ عَنِ الطُّلُوءِ عن الطلول كأنها زبر تجد متونها أقلامها. And this line is like one of the major sort of golden lines in poetry, and the meaning is, and the torrents have newly laid bare the marks of the ruins, as if they were lines of writing whose text the pens retraced. So on Farazda, he heard this above line, he prostrated, right? So the people censored him because there was Muslims around, they censored him, and he replied to them by saying, you know the places of prostration in the Qur'an, and I know the places of prostration in poetry, and this is one of them, just to indicate how poetry and Arabic literature, how important it was. They used to venerate it. And this is a line from Labid. And the interesting story about Labid, he became a Muslim, he embraced Islam. After he embraced Islam, he gave up poetry altogether. He gave up poetry altogether. And when he was asked about why did you give up all poetry altogether, he said that, you know, what is left of poetry after I have found Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran, right? So, and Labid, he is one of their master poets. So, you know, it completely, you know, put him out of business in terms of, you know, his profession as a poet. Now, this is all to kind of give you an appreciation of the importance of the Arabic language and Arabic literature in the time of the revelation of the Qur'an. Now, let me mention another very famous story. And again, the reason why I'm mentioning this is to kind of give you historical proofs and historical testimony as to the superiority of the Quran. Al-Walid bin al-Mughira al-Makhzumi, he is one of the leaders of Quraysh. He's one of the top leaders of Quraysh, and he was a major opponent to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to Islam and Muslims. Now, there's a long story here, but I want to cut the story down. So Al-Qurtubi, he is a Mufassir, he narrated that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he read the first few lines of Surah Al-Fussilat, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, آمين, تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز العليم, غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول, لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير, آمين. This is a revelation of the book from Allah, the Mighty, the All-Knowing, the one who forgives sins and accepts repentance, the one who is severe in punishment, the one who is the source of all power. There is no God but He. To Him is the ultimate return of all. So Al-Walid bin Mughira, he hearing this recitation, spontaneously, he proclaimed the following statement. He said, Wallahi, laqad sami'tu minhu kalaman, ma huwa min kalam al-insi wala min kalam al-jinni, wa inna lahu la halawa, wa inna alayhi la talawa, wa inna aghlahu لا مثمر وإن أسفله مغدق وإنه لا يعلو ولا يعلى عليه وما يقول هذا وما يقول هذا بشر. He said, by Allah, he's now making an oath. I mean, they believed in Allah and also associate partners with him, but he made an oath, right? He said, you know, سمعت منه كلاما. I have heard speech, such as the speech from him, Muhammad, as can neither be the speech of a mortal, of a human being, nor of a jinn. I mean, he's kind of now really saying, you know, he's probably never heard of a speech of jinns, but he's so overpowered by this speech. He's saying it's not a human speech, nor is it a speech of jinns. It has sweetness and elegance. Its upper part is fruit bearing, its lower part causes water to flow. Its beauty, no doubt, surpasses the beauty of all speeches, and it cannot be superseded. وَمَا يَقُولُ هَذَا بَشَرٌ. It is not a speech of any human beings. Al-Walid bin Mughira, in other reports, he says to them, I am the best of your poets. I know all of your poets in all of your meters and your forms. I know all this. I know the poets of the Kahin, the soothsayers. I know the poets of the, you know, the orators, the narrators. Yeah, that he is an expert. He is one of their expert in literature. This is his reaction to when he heard the Quran. Now, the reason why I've mentioned all of this, that the Quran being revealed in that situation, in that condition. Now, what is the true extent of the miraculousness of the Quran? It is really manifested in the Quran's new linguistic newness. It was literally a new category of literature, right? Because, you know, literature for the Arabs, you know, and for others, you have poetry. Poetry is basically based on meter and rhythm. And in the Arabic poetry, after analysis, right, there are generally 16 types of meters, right? 16 types of meters. Any poem which is to be considered Arabic poetry will fall into one of these 16 types of meters, right? And they had prose, they had rhymed prose, and they had free prose as well. What we find in the Quran, when you analyze the Quran, those who know Arabic literature, when you analyze the Quran, Quran is neither poetry nor is it prose. It is a unique style, right? Now, I want you to really appreciate this point, that it's like a very unique genre, right? Now, many of us may not be, you know, have literary background, but let's just give, for example, you know, I don't know, you know, films, for example, and theater, and what have you. So if you think about, you know, films, you have different genre, right? You have drama, you have comedy, you have adventure, you have action, right? You have all of these different genres, right? And generally, when you're looking for a film, you look at different categories, right? When it came to literature, Arabic literature, it was like poetry and prose, and the various types of poetry and various types of prose. And what we find, Quran did not fit into any of these categories at all whatsoever. It was a completely new genre, a unique style, right? And this is a fact that is attested to by the Arabs of old, right? And throughout the years, and even those who are Muslims and non-Muslims alike, who are studying Arabic language and Arabic literature, when it comes to the Quran, they can't pigeonhole the Quran to either poetry or to prose or its various subclassification. It is a unique genre completely. However, that unique genre, it is composed of the Arabic language. It is composed of the Arabic language. And just coming back, just as a side point, you find often in the Quran that the verses or the surahs in the Quran, they will actually start with these letters of the alphabet. So in this case, Hamim In other cases, alif lam ra or alif lam mim. Now, one of the which is a unique style, one of the reasons or the benefits of that is to indicate to the listeners that this speech is from your language. So whenever you have this in the Quran, alif lam mim or ha mim, you will find straight afterwards, just open up any surah which begins with huruf al-muqatta'at, you'll find straight away there will be a mention to the Quran, or mention to the book. So ha mim, tanzilul kitabi min Allah, right? A revelation from of the kitab from Allah. And that is to indicate all the time to the people who are reading that this Quran, this miraculousness, its uniqueness is in the language. So now the question is regarding the author, right? Author of the Quran. Where is the author? Who is the author of the Quran? Because the Quran, we have it, right? It was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions throughout the age, and we have it today as well. And there's a question regarding the author. Who is the author of the Quran, right? Now, logically speaking, the author of the Quran, it could be the Arabs, it could be Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And also he's an Arab, or it could be non-Arabs, yeah, as a possibility, or it could be other than all of that, and it could be the one who actually claims, right, in the book, right, to be the author, which is the creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the options that we have to go through. Now, as for the Arabs, you know, I want to mention this point in a bit. The Arabs were effectively challenged to produce something like the Quran. They were not able to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a nutshell, he's an Arab, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if we compare his speech, because we have the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have the hadith, right, which have been authenticated and has been transmitted to us. And when we compare the speech and the phrase and the way he spoke and compare it to the speech and the style of the Quran, you find they are two different speeches. All right. Very interestingly, those who are interested, there's a link here. It's called digitalstudies.org, and effectively there was a comparison, right, using modern day computer algorithm and computer processing, comparing Quranic speech with the speech of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, for example, they were comparing with Sahih al-Bukhari, which is one of the most authentic collection of hadith, the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they compared that to the Quran and looked at the various aspects of speech, various features of speech. And if you are really interested in the details, you can go to this study and you can see it. What was interesting, just as a highlight, that they found that 62% of the words from Sahih al-Bukhari, right, does not appear, in the Quran. So 62% of the words which are attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do not actually appear in the Quran, and 83% of Quranic terms does not exist in the Hadith. Does not exist in the Hadith. Just as a sample, just to indicate these two speeches are different, and we can immediately identify the speech of the Quran, and we can immediately identify the speech of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And because the speech of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a human speech, although the meanings which is being conveyed is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why you have had, throughout the ages, people were fabricating hadith, and attributing it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they were able to kind of mimic his speech and trying to sneak in hadith in his name, but which were actually forged. Right. As for non-Arabs, I mean, this is an obvious. If you don't speak Arabic, you're not going to be able to, bring anything like it or understand it. So non-Arabs is not an option. And finally, we're saying that, if it is not the Arabs, If it's not Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course not non-Arabs, then the only other explanation, reasonable explanation, is to believe that it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right. So the Quranic challenge, for those who are not aware. So Quran, it came and brought a challenge. So a mu'jiza, a miracle, it's basically challenging people to bring something like of the Quran, something similar to the Quran. And that was the challenge that was given. Now the challenge has 3 stages, right? The first challenge is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he challenged the Arabs to bring something like of the Quran. Yeah, something like of the Quran. So in Surah Al-Isra, he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, قُلْ لَإِنِ اجْتَمَعَتِ الْإِنسُ وَالْجِنُّ على أن يأتوا بمثل هذا القرآن لا يأتون بمثله ولو كان بعضهم لبعض ظهيرا. Say, addressing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, say, if mankind and the jinn gathered in order to produce the like of this Quran, they could not produce the like of it, even if they were to be helpers and assistants to each other. So this is the challenge that the Quran has put forward, right, to mankind, right? You know, al-ins wal-jinn, and even jinns, right? If they were collectively to come together to produce something like that, they're not able to do it. So that was the challenge in the first stage, to bring something like that of the Quran. And then the challenge got, you know, made slightly easier, right? The challenge became slightly easier, where in Surah 11, is it Hud or Surah Yunus? Can't remember. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Am yaquluna iftarah, or do they say he invented it? You know, these polytheists, these Arab mushriks, the Quraysh, do they say that he invented it, he made it up? Then Allah says, Qul, say, فَأْتُوا بِعَشْرِ سُوَرٍ مِثْلِهِ مُفْتَرَيَاتٍ وَادْعُوا مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Say, then bring 10 surahs like that have been invented, and call upon for assistance whomever you can besides Allah, if you should be truthful. So the challenge was now reduced to bring 10 surahs like of the Quran, 10 chapters of the Quran. Then finally, once they did not meet this challenge or fulfill this challenge, could not come up with anything of 10, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he finally reduced the challenge to 1 surah. وَإِن كُنتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَى عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And if you are in doubt about what we have sent down upon our servant Muhammad, then produce a surah, the like thereof, and call upon your witness other than Allah if you should be truthful. So first bring the Quran, like the Quran. If you can't, you know, you're not able to do that, then bring 10 chapters. And if you're not able to do that, then bring at least 1 chapter. There's 114 chapters in the Quran. And the smallest chapter in the Quran is Surah Al-Kawthar, right? It is literally 3 lines and it consists of 10 words, right? I'm going to mention this particular surah towards the end. Right, I'm going to speed up a little bit. Right, so what is it what does the Quran really signify? The Quran really signifies what I called a new linguistic revolution. It was a revolution in literature and language at that time. Because one of the things I want you to really understand is that what we notice about language, language develops over a period of time. You don't see a sudden fundamental change in language. You see over years and decades, new terms, new phrases, new figures of speech are they become in use, and then they just become part of vocabulary and part of everyday use. That's why you see for example, the English dictionary, every year or every couple of years, they add new words and new phrases and new figures of speech into it, because it's been developed, in the last few years. Like today, we have something called social media, Facebook, internet, all these terms and phrases that we have, um, they were not around 10, 15 years ago, right? But these have made it into our vocabulary, made it into the dictionary, made it into the language. But it's a slow and evolutionary process. But what we find with the Quran was a radical process in changing the way how the language was being used to communicate ideas. And this is the point that I want to really focus on today. So I want to mention a couple of unique features of the Quran which did not exist. First of all, Quran came with a new way of organizing literature, right? So Quran had something called surah, chapters. The Arabs never had something called surahs, chapters. They never had something called ayats, like what we called the verses of the Quran. They're called ayats, right? Now, so what they used to have is they used to have, qasidas. They used to have like poems, and the poems used to have like, stanzas and baits and what have you, right? And surah and chapter, this terminology, this way of organizing literature was never amongst them. It was not known amongst them. So the Quran came with a new literary architecture. That's probably the best word I could find. Architecture for the Quran, giving it source and ayats, right? So that's really new. Secondly, the Quran can be read in more than one way. So the Quran, it's got a number of different recitations, all right? We have like 7 to 10 different ways in the Quran can be recited with minor adjustment of words. So for example, Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin. Both have been revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's one text, but it is actually recited with Maliki Yawmiddin, Maliki Yawmiddin, and the meanings, they are complementary. And there's, we have the famous 7 recitation, and there are more, but there's 7 well-known recitation. And this is very unique feature of the Quran, because the poems are recited in one way. They're not recited in 2, 3, or 4, 5 different ways. So this is very unique feature of the Quran. The way I'm going to very quickly go through this. The way the Quranic text is actually written, for example, right? It's written differently from with its own spelling structures and its own uniqueness, right? Also, we find that the Quran is to be recited melodically, right, with tajweed. So there is a whole science of how to recite the Quran. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he recited the Quran, it wasn't just like a normal reading. It was recitation with the rules of tajweed, right? Anyway, the point that I've mentioned, I'm not going to go through all 12 here, is that to say the Quran, it came and brought a new genre with a new architecture of literature. Yeah, and this, happened radically, from day one. Okay, so I want to mention now today newness of construction and expression. Okay, and because that's really what we want to look at to show the uniqueness of the Quranic literature. So I'm going to mention a couple of things. And by the way, towards the end of this, I've got some resources for you to read and to kind of develop further on this discussion. So we'll look at Suratul Muddathir. Suratul Muddathir, I think, is Surah number 74. maybe 75, if memory serves me. I can't remember what number it is, but anyway, it's one of the earliest surahs. Could be surah that is revealed number 2 or number 3 in the order of revelation. So it's in the earliest period of revelation, and we will look at constructions, yeah, terkib or tarakib. So these are constructions of which are less than a sentence, right? Made up of particles, conjunctions, and prepositions and single letters. So they are, they don't give a complete meaning or complete word, right? So they are, as I've mentioned here, they're like prepositions and particles. So we'll look at from that aspect, the feature of that side of things. Secondly, we'll look at ta'birat, expressions, right? Expressions, they are, if you like, a sentence, yeah, or something that actually conveys a complete idea. And lastly, we'll look at sabaic, yeah, patterns. Yeah, these are like larger linguistic unit that may contain contractions and expressions. So, constructions and expressions is a typo here. Constructions and expressions. So they're large. They're like larger than a sentence, but less than a paragraph, if you like. Yeah. So the sabaic, and we would basically look at from this 3 aspect and take one of the surahs, yeah, Suratul Muddathir, and really show the radical change in literature, right? So for example, just give you some everyday example that was used by the Arabs at that time, and Quranic constructions came with something new, right, which was not used by the Arabs. So for example, if you want to say, who is that? Everyday Arabic, yeah, it will be man alladhi, man alladhi, yeah, man alladhi. That's how I would say it. But Quran came, said man alladhi, man alladhi, right? And it means who is that? But it brought a new construction completely, right? Man alladhi is still made up of Arabic letters and particles, but it's brought a new construction, right? So man alladhi, right? So that's something new, which was like completely new to the Arab, but they understood it because it's Arabic language, but it was a new construction, and it wasn't something that was developed over a period of time. A couple of other examples, and again, I'm not going to go through all of that. So for example, if you want to say, might you, right? So you say, هل ينتظر منكم, هل ينتظر منكم, right? So this is everyday Arabic. Now, the new construction, yeah, is هل أسيتم, هل أسيتم, right? It's a new construction that the Quran brought, as an example. If you want to say, for example, after, you say بعدا, right? But the new construction the Quran brought is بعد إذ, right? So again, and this was like from day one. Let's look at, right. So some constructions here from Surah Al-Muddathir. So this is Surah Al-Muddathir. Let me just, if you look here, I don't know if you can, I don't know what's happened now.
Yep, can see that.
You can see that, okay. So this is Surah Al-Muddathir, right? Surah Al-Muddathir is, what number is it? 74, right? Surah Al-Muddathir is really a couple of pages, yeah. So it has, how many? It has 56 verses, and it's one of the earliest surahs which was revealed, Surah Al-Muddathir. So inshallah, that's what I'm not gonna go through the surah, but I've got it basically on the PowerPoint presentation to go through that. Let me bring my PowerPoint, wherever that's gone. No. I'll stop sharing and just try to find my document. What's happened to it? Here we go. Let me go back to it. Okay, I know I'm going on, but I'm going to whiz through some of this stuff now very quickly. All right. Okay. So here, for example, in this surah, Surah Al-Muddathir, you know, it's 56 verses. There's When studying this, there's 12 new constructions which was not used by the Arabs. And how do we know that? Because research has been done comparing the literature of the time and comparing the expressions used in the Quran to see if there's any distinction between Quranic expressions and the literature of that time. So after analysis, people have come to conclusion that in Surah Al-Muddathir, this is relatively a short surah, it's got 12 new constructions. So here, I've listed the verses here. So for example, you know, kalla innahu, nay, verily it is, right? This is a new type of construction, right? فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ, that every day shall be. It's a new construction, as an example. Right, so now looking at the different types of expressions. Okay, I'm going to whiz through this. So in terms of expressions, if we talk about expressions, we're talking about something which is which really has is meaning of a sentence. It has a complete idea. So for example, in this surah, there's some new. So ya ayyuhal muddathir is completely new. Kum fa'anzir, yeah, it's completely new. Wa rabbaka fakabbir is completely new. These are all new expressions which never existed at the time of the revelation of this surah itself. So this is, I've just listed them here. So here there's 65 new expressions, right? That's found in Surah Al-Muddathir. So here, with the exception of two expressions, la tubqi wa la tadhar in verse 28, and yasha Allah in verse 56, right? Both of which later came to be used in both formal and to a lesser extent informal non-Quranic Arabic. The remaining expressions have remained restricted to Quran only. So apart from these couple of expressions, the entire Quran, in the entire surah, is full of new expressions, completely full of new expressions. And nobody brings literature like this. Literature develops over a period of time. No human beings brings a complete new genre. It is a process of evolutionary development. New words in Surah Al-Muddathir. So there are, for example, there's 256 words. Out of 256 words, there are 84 new words. New words meaning new coinage. So these words, they exist in the Arabic language, but they have been coined to give a new meaning. And these words were not used previously in this sense. So an example of this, rujs. Yeah, rijs, for example, it just means filth. All right, in linguistics, it just means filth. But this was a new term used to refer to idols, yeah. It's talking about the spiritual impurity of worshipping idols, or it's referred to the term to torment, punishment, right? An-Naqur, As-Sauda, all of these again, and there are, I've only mentioned 12. There's about 84 of them. These are new usage, was not in vogue at the time of revelation. Surah Al-Muddathir, 14 uses of Arabic particles, right? So particles that we have, these hurufs, there's a new way the Quran was using particles, which was never used at that time. So for example, the word fa. Fa literally means then, right? It's usually, in Arabic literature at that time, it's usually placed between two verbs and two nouns, right? And it's a function of being to connect the second verb to the first verb, or to connect the second noun to the first noun. So it's used in that sense. But what we find in the Quran, this new usage, new style, is that you find this was not in use. So for example, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, right? وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ وَالرُّجْسَ فَاهْجُرْ, right? Really, the structure should have been فَكَبِّرْ رَبِّكَ, right? فَكَبِّرْ رَبِّكَ. So what you are having here, you're having the object, right, which is coming before the verb, right? So this kind of formatting and this kind of usage, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, it should have been normally فَطَهِّرْ ثِيَابَكَ, right? فَهْجُرْ رُجْزَ, right? So this is a complete break, a revolutionary break from the way in which particles were being used. Okay, the types of images found in Surah Al-Muddathir, right? There are so many different types of images that's found in Surah Al-Muddathir. So let me just give you an example, and I haven't got time to go through all of them. So for example, the expression kafaru, right? Kafaru. Kafaru means, it means they disbelieved. But really the meaning of kafaru, that is, means they are persistent in denying the truth. Now, look at this imagery that's being used here. Now, the word kafara in its original Arabic sort of meaning, it means to conceal something, to cover up something, right? So they use the word kafir, for example, for the meaning of the word farmer, because the farmer, he conceals the the seeds underneath the soil. They used it in that sense. Now, Qur'an came and took that meaning and used it figuratively to indicate on those who deny the truth, because they are concealing the truth. They're covering up the truth. So rejection of faith is like the act of covering up. So this is a new imagery that is found in the Quran, in this surah. And there's, you know, here we've mentioned many of the imageries. Haven't got time to go through them, but just give you a taste. Right, finally, or sort of finally, right, I want to talk just a little bit about, just give you a taste about the sensitivity and the eloquence and the perfection of Quran, and give you example of diction, word choice. So here, if you look at this verse in surah number 21, don't know, I can't remember what surah it is, but anyway, surah number 21, verse number 46. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولئن مستم نفحة من عذاب ربك لا يقولن يا ويلنا إنا كنا ظالمين. Right? So here in translation, and if as much as a whiff of the punishment of your Lord should touch them, they would surely say, woe to us, indeed we have been wrongdoers. Now, the whole point of this verse is to indicate on the lightest and the smallest, yeah, of torments, of punishment, the lightest, the least type of punishment. Now, what you find here is that all of the words which have been chosen, they are chosen so meticulously, they actually mirror the meaning that these words and these particles and these phrases are coined for. So if you look, for example, la'in, but if but, or but if, yeah. Now this expression suggests uncertainty, implies lightness or lack of sternness of punishment. That's the implication, the lack of sternness in punishment. Massa is a verb that means to touch, and it indicates what? Lightly, to brush something, yeah. So again, indicates the notion of lightness. Nafha, nafha means a breath, right? A whiff, a puff. Is inconsequential, is harmless. And the tanween here, nafhatun, is to indicate on singularity and indefiniteness, right? All of this is chosen to indicate on this, you know, lightness. The word min, this is the min of partitive min, to indicate some of, yeah, not total, some of. And the word adhab that's been used here, adhab is being used to indicate, you know, less less severe punishment than other words which are used for punishment. Nakal means an exemplary punishment, and iqab, it means a very strict, a severe punishment. So adhab is of lower degree. What you find is that each of these words have been selected precisely in order to reflect the end meaning. So the form is congruent with the ma'na, with the actual meaning itself. And this is an example of diction. And you find this throughout the entirety of the Quran, right? Yes, you might find a good author, etc. He might do that with a line or two, right? But to maintain that throughout the book, the poetry, the speech is an impossibility. Yeah, so this is an example of diction. Right, finally, shortest chapter in the Quran. Shortest chapter in the Quran is Surah Al-Kawthar. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shaniyaka huwa al-abtar. Right, this is the shortest surah in the Quran. It's made up of 10 words, right? And in this, and I haven't got time, there is at least 15 new innovation, yeah, linguistic innovation in this surah itself. Every surah has something very unique that characterizes each surah, which you will not find anywhere else in the Quran. This is one very important point. So for example, the word fasalli rabbika, the verb salla yusalli, to pray, it's used with other prepositions, like for example ala, right? It's used with ala. Now here, the only place in the Quran that's been used with the preposition lam is in this surah, and nowhere else in the Quran. It's unique. Yeah, you don't use it anywhere else. Even the expression, the word kawthar, right, is not used anywhere else in the Quran. It's only here, right? The word wanhar, right, is only used in this surah and nowhere else. Shaniak is only used here, right, in this surah and nowhere else in the Quran. And al-abtar is only used here in this chapter and nowhere else in the Quran. Quran is 114 chapters, over 6,000. I can't remember the exact number, over 6,000 verses, and you find Kawthar, the use of the preposition li, the command verb wanhar, the active participle sha'aniyaka is only used here, and this ism tafdil abtar, right, the superlative, is only used here amongst the 114 chapters. This is the signature of this chapter itself. Is unique. Now, what is the meaning? Okay, I just want to just give you an idea about the challenge, right? When we say to produce something like it, and it's really important to understand what is being meant by to produce something like it. If we study, and I haven't got the time to go through, if we study this word by word, phrase by phrase, yeah, pattern by pattern, the entire three, right? The overall meaning, the paraphrased meaning of these three verses is what's actually I've kind of mentioned here. O Prophet, we have indeed given you unparalleled good like rivers, pools in paradise, unequal knowledge, the Quran, prophethood, and innumerable followers. So offer prayer to your Lord and turn towards him doing what is good and to make sacrifice and what he has ordered you to do. Your enemy will surely be in ruin and should be cut off, not cut off from all that is good if he opposes you. This is the overall meaning, because this surah was revealed to Muhammad SAW after the death of his sons. And after the death of his sons, one of the Quraysh, they said that he is not going to have any legacy. He will not have any legacies because legacies are carried through their sons, right? And they said that the Prophet ﷺ, he is cut off. He is cut off. In reply to this, this verse was revealed, as a consolation to the Prophet ﷺ and as a rebuke to the ones who said that to him. And so the challenge, if somebody was to produce something like this, is to say, right, this is the overall meaning, right? This is the overall meaning, and you need to bring something like this surah, like this chapter, to convey this meaning, right? So here, inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, you can't, and by the way, bring something like it doesn't mean plagiarize it. You've seen, unfortunately, there's so many people out there say, I've bought something like the Quran. What they've effectively done, they've copied and pasted from the Quran and changed a word here and there, right? Plagiarism. To bring something like it, what does that mean? It means you need to produce something that has this meaning, but you need to have something that's resembling the style, yeah, of this surah. So here, inna is used, yeah, indeed we, right? And there's emphasis here, and that shows majesty here. So you have to bring an expression, right, which is inna. That has the meaning of inna, but you need to bring an expression. But you can't just say inna, but you're just copying it. A'tainaka, right, we've given you, right? You have to bring an expression to indicate on a'tainaka. So there's different words available in the Arabic language. So you have ata and you have a'ta. Ata means to give as well, and a'ta also means to give. And why is a'ta chosen and not ata? Because there's difference between them two. So you have to, kawthar, kawthar means abundance, right? You have to bring something from the language that will indicate. So there's word choices, there is choices that needs to be made regarding the types of phrases and sentence. So this is a nominal sentence. So this nominal sentence can be constructed in different ways. You might bring a verbal sentence if you want to. So this is what it means. You have to kind of bring something like this in this form. Now, this is not poetry and it's not prose. So you can't use poetry, right? And you can't use prose, whether it's rhythm prose, whether it's free prose. You have to bring something like this in terms of word choices, in terms of structure, in terms of sound as well, the ending, right? The musicality of it needs to be there also coming together. Now, finally, somebody may say, okay, if somebody brings it, who's the judge? And how do we know that this is all subjective? One man's literary taste is different to another person's literary taste, right? It's very subjective. How do we know this? Right, there's a couple of things to understand this. First of all, when we are analyzing the text, first of all, the words, the meanings of words, they're in the dictionary. It's not how I feel or feel about words that decides the meaning of words. Yeah, the meaning of words is what's in the dictionary. It's what's being used by the people of the language, right? We can't. There's no subjectivity in it, right? If in English, the word table has a particular meaning, and I can't just say, well, I don't like the word, I want to call it something else. No, there's nothing. There's nothing subjective about that. You need to be objective in the sense that's what a table is. That's what it's in the dictionary. So there is a objective standard. Secondly, the rules of grammar, right? The rules of grammar, they're not just subjective. If you want to learn English, you learn English grammar, right? And that's how it is. If you want to learn French, you learn French grammar. You can't just say, well, I want to just change the French grammar. That's objective. Arabic grammar is objective. It's got its various rules, yeah? And these rules, they're not linked to any religion. They're not linked to any viewpoint about life. They are neutral in the sense that they are means of constructing meanings from words and phrases. So the grammar is objective. Thirdly, the ways of expressions, right? Figurative speech, what is considered a good figurative speech and a bad figurative speech, and how the figurative speech is linked to the literal usage of the words. It's also cultural and language specific as well, right? So there is objective standards of meanings of words, expressions in the language, whether you're Muslim, non-Muslims, they will become your yardstick. Now, subjectivity really comes to what? It comes to the way you feel about things, right? So you might, inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli rabbika wanhar inna shanika wal abtar. Somebody might read it and they may feel about it in a particular way. So for example, when a Muslim reads this, that he will feel, from a feeling point of view, he will feel honored that, you know, he is part of the legacy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because here, inna a'tainaka al-kawthar, that we will give you abundance. And part of the meaning of abundance is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have abundance in followers. Today there's 2 billion Muslims around the world, and we are, many of us are part of that, and we feel honored by that, and we will take certain pride in this surah. That's our subjective feeling. A non-Muslim reading it, he will not feel that. That subjectivity has nothing to do with the criticism or to analyze the text whatsoever, right? So analysis of the text got nothing to do with it. Let me give you something more concrete, right? You know, if you watch a film, right, you can come out of the film and you can there's two ways of analyzing the film. One is the subjective analysis, whether you like the film or not, right? Whether you personally like the film. I don't know if you've been to a movie or cinema or whatever it is, and people come out and they are expressing two thoughts. One thought is their subjective feeling. I liked it, I didn't like it, it was good, or was bad, right? That's subjective. There's another discussion about the quality of the film, the quality of the film, the script of the film, the actors, the twists and the turns and the dialogue, right? These have objective measures, right? Even if you don't like the film. So when we are talking about, you know, bring something like it, who's going to be the judge of it? The people who are experts of the language. You're going to present it to them, and they will look at the language and look at your expressions, and they will actually give you a scorecard, yeah, to see how you compare. So this, often I've heard this, people say it's just subjective. No, it's not subjective. There are standard rules. And we know that in everyday life. So for example, if you remember in English class, you used to be given a topic to write about and an essay on, right? And everybody would submit their essay, and the teacher will give somebody A, B, C, D on the same topic, right? Do you think that the teacher just did that subjective, just based on the way you look, how he feels about you? Or did he have a standard set of criteria for deciding what is good, bad, and ugly? He had the standard set of criteria for deciding what is good, bad, and ugly. On that basis, he gave you the mark. In the same way, there's no difference when it comes to judging the literary merit of if somebody is claiming to produce something like of the Quran. Abdul Karim,